Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving headfirst into a really wild, misty 12th century mystery straight out of King Stephen's reign in England. It's one of those bizarre puzzles that has honestly baffled historians, doctors, and folklore experts for centuries, kind of blurring the line between solid historical record and pure myth. I'm talking, of course, about the Green Mystery of Woolpit. So picture this. It's 1150 AD and two literal green children just walk right out of the woods. I know, it sounds exactly like the start of some fantasy novel, right? But here's the thing. This was actually recorded as a real event by chroniclers of the time in the Suffolk village of Wolpit. It immediately forces us to ask, did these kids come from another world? Maybe a subterranean kingdom? Or is the truth actually entirely human and maybe even a bit darker? Let's unpack the evidence. Okay, let's map out the timeline here. We start right at the peak of the harvest season in 1150 AD. Local villagers are out working the fields when suddenly they stumble upon these two terrified children hiding near a trench. And this wasn't a simple rescue mission. Just days later, we see a complete dietary rejection by the children. Tragically, a few months after that, the younger boy passes away. So what exactly happened in those crucial first few days to trigger this whole chain of events?
Let's look at the anomalies. Specifically, the initial clues gathered right from that harvest field.
Imagine you're a medieval farmer. You find two kids, and their skin is this vivid, uncanny shade of green. No joke, literally green. On top of that, they're speaking a language that is completely unrecognizable to absolutely anyone in the village. They're wearing strange, unfamiliar clothing made from materials nobody can identify, and understandably, they're in a state of total confusion and just absolute terror. The villagers immediately whisked them away to the local manor for safety, but honestly, the strangeness was only just beginning. Now, the dietary anomaly here is absolutely fascinating. The villagers, trying to be helpful, offered them standard medieval fare. We're talking bread, meat, wine. But the children completely rejected the whole shebang. They were clearly starving, but they wouldn't touch a single thing until they spotted some raw beans straight from the harvest field. I mean, sure, turning down medieval wine is one thing, but devouring raw beans? Once they saw those stalks, they practically inhaled them. It really makes you wonder why raw beans were literally the only thing they recognized as food. Moving on to the tragedy, and the incredibly vital witness testimony from the girl who survived. So the older girl survives, and she slowly starts to adapt to her new reality. First, she gradually learns English, which finally bridges that massive communication gap. Next, she starts adapting to the local food, moving beyond just eating raw beans all day. And then, and this is probably the most fascinating biological detail, the strange green hue of her skin actually begins to fade. It was almost as if the very air, sunlight, and nutrition of our world were literally washing that strange green shadow right off her body as she assimilated. Once she could finally speak the local language, she unlocked the door to her past. She told the villagers that she and her brother came from a place called St. Martin's Land, and the contrast she described between our world and hers is just staggering. To her, Wolpit was a world of bright, unbearable, blinding sunlight. But her home, St. Martin's Land, she said it had no sunlight at all. It was a place of perpetual twilight. Just imagine what it would be like stepping out of eternal dusk into the blinding light of a bright summer day. Her actual account goes exactly like this. We were herding cattle, entered a cavern, followed an echo, and emerged into the blinding light of Wolpit. It's such a simple yet absolutely stunning testimony. She's describing wandering deeper and deeper into a dark cavern, just following the faint echo of sounds, until they literally stumbled out into our world. You can imagine how the sheer sincerity and sorrow in her testimony left the villagers completely stunned. So what does this all mean? Was she describing a subterranean civilization hidden deep beneath medieval England? Or perhaps, as some of the more fantastic local legends like to suggest, a parallel dimension? Let's just take a brief pause here. Think about the heavy emotional weight of this for a second. A young child, separated from her home by a dark cavern, completely overwhelmed by the blinding brightness of a strange new world, having just lost her only companion. It's an incredibly eerie and really tragic thought. Which brings us to the expert analysis, looking at both the science and the history behind this. First up, let's tackle the most visually jarring detail of this whole case, the green skin. Medical experts point straight to a condition known as chlorosis. Now, this is a very real medical condition caused by severe iron deficiency, and it can actually result in a greenish tint to the skin. So yes, severe malnutrition could quite literally turn a human being green. And when you remember that the children ravenously devoured raw beans, which happened to be absolutely packed with iron, this actually starts to make a ton of biological sense. The green skin wasn't magic, guys. It was a symptom. Over the years, experts have basically settled into a few primary camps, trying to explain all this. We have the medical theory of chlorosis, which, as we just saw, explains the skin tone perfectly. Then we have an incredibly compelling historical theory suggesting these children were persecuted Flemish immigrants hiding in mines. And finally, there's the folklore perspective, which argues the entire story is just an allegory, a fairy tale born from real historical trauma. Let's look a little closer at that historical explanation, because it kind of ties the whole shebang together. So, back during King Stephen's reign in the 12th century, Flemish immigrants in England faced some pretty brutal persecution. Historians suggest that these children could have been orphans of a targeted Flemish family, who were essentially forced to hide in the dark, damp recesses of a mine or cave system just to survive. Think about it. The darkness and trauma perfectly explain their fear of sunlight and that twilight world they described. The extreme malnutrition from hiding underground, that explains the chlorosis. And their completely unrecognized language might have simply been Flemish, a dialect that rural English villagers in Wolpit would have absolutely never heard before. And that brings us to the unresolved legacy of the Green Children. Which leaves us with a pretty massive final question. Is this all just a compelling fairy tale, an allegory that grew and warped over the centuries? Or is this the very real, desperate cry of lost, traumatized children buried beneath the weight of historical persecution? While the historical and medical evidence strongly points to the latter, the legend continues to captivate us. We've explored the facts and the leading theories together in this explainer, but ultimately, perhaps some mysteries are just meant to retain a little bit of their magic. What do you think really happened in that field? Keep questioning, keep learning, and thank you so much for joining me for this deep dive.